Stephen A., do you like, love, or hate Kaepernick's protest?
I liked it. I didn't love it because I'm not going to say that I would have done the same thing in terms of protesting with the national anthem because of how it could be interpreted. And I'm certainly not going to say I hate it, A, because he had every right to do what he did. We're talking about First Amendment of the Constitution, where it gives you the freedom of speech. Definitely he exercised his right. And I want to make sure that I make this point before I get into what I have to say, Max, about specifically what Colin Kaepernick did. There are a lot of people out there that think about the national anthem and think about the flag. And, you know, they've been getting on Colin Kaepernick because they say it's disrespectful to our American soldiers. I want to emphatically state that I disagree with that. They are absolutely flat out wrong. The soldiers who put their lives on the line and sacrifice themselves for our country, they don't sacrifice themselves so you can do what they want you to do. They've sacrificed themselves so you can do what the Constitution allows you to do, that you can uphold that. That's what they fought for your right to do what Colin Kaepernick did. They didn't do that so you could sit up, so you could stand up at attention at their beck and call. They say you want the freedom of religion, freedom of speech, etc. This is what comes with it. It's the First Amendment of the United States Constitution. That is what Colin Kaepernick exercised. So when people bring up our military and they bring up our soldiers as it pertains to his refusal to stand and salute during our national anthem, that's a problem, because they're not paying attention to what our country is founded upon and what, you know, our rules, our laws, etc. are based upon. So I wanted to say that. Having said all of that, Colin Kaepernick brought attention to something that, by and large, folks had better recognize the black community is feeling very, very adamant about. He was talking about police brutality. He's obviously a staunch supporter of Black Lives Matter. And though some people may disagree with some of the actions we've seen of few folks who represent Black Lives Matter in terms of how they've conducted themselves, by and large, the attention brought to the issue is something that's undeniable. The need for the attention brought to this issue, it's absolutely undeniable. Now, we were in Chicago the other day talking about black-on-black violence and various other things, and we know that that's a prevalent issue. That's something that I've been screaming about for the last couple of years, primarily. There's no doubt that that's an issue that cannot be ignored. It's an issue that needs to be addressed. I think that issue is bigger than anything affecting the African-American community personally. Having said all of that, that in no way diminishes the importance of brutality on the part of some police officers and how that has resonated throughout the black community. And Colin Kaepernick's willingness to bring that up in this fashion is something, again, I'm not going to say I love it because I would have found a different means of doing it, but I'm not going to hate on him for it either. He's conscientious enough. He's studied enough. He wanted to bring attention to it. He didn't drop any bombs on anybody. He didn't shoot anybody. He didn't harm anybody. He made a quiet, personal protest. And for people to react this way in an incendiary fashion, I'm going to agree with my man Sean King for the New York Daily News when he pointed out that's their problem. That's not Colin Kaepernick's problem. I've got more to say, but I definitely want to hear what you have to say, Max. But I don't really have a problem with it. Again, it's not the ideal way in which to do it, but what we must applaud to Colin Kaepernick more so than anything else, he personified what a protest is supposed to be. We can get into it a little bit later, but as much as I applaud CP3 and Dwayne Wade and Carmelo Anthony and LeBron James and how they opened the ESPYs, they brought attention to a particular subject that's permeating our society. They should be applauded for it, as they were, but at the same time, they in no way forced anybody to take sides. They in no way forced anybody to take a position one way or the other. It was indisputable what their argument is. Colin Kaepernick is forcing you to take sides. That, to me, is the personification of what any kind of protest, quiet or otherwise, is all about. And I applaud him for that.
I'm not going to say I love it for the same reason, because if you say you love it, it sounds like you don't love America, and I love America, and I know you do too.
That's right.
And one of the reasons I love America is because this is such an American thing for Colin Kaepernick to have done. You don't have to stand. And in my opinion, he should love America for that. And I'm sure he does love his right to do that. And for those who think that so here's the irony. For those who protest by not standing up, you get to sit down because you're an American. You don't have to stand up because you're an American. But the irony for the people who complain about it, he should stand up, is that if it's compulsory, in other words, if you have to stand up or it's unpatriotic, then if you stand, you're not necessarily showing anything that's patriotic. It's not a choice you're making. It's something that everyone's supposed to do. How is that really an act of patriotism? And when people bring up veterans, which is nothing Colin Kaepernick brought up, he brought up a domestic policing issue. When people bring up, oh, the veterans stand, so you should stand, that's kind of a buzzword. It's a catch-all. Oh, back off, because when you hear veterans, who doesn't support our men and women in uniform, even if you don't support all of our foreign policy, we all support our men and women in uniform. So people say, veterans stand up, you should too, and that's supposed to get everyone to back off. And I think that's kind of, you're trying to intimidate someone off of their stand. Here's what it seems to me that Colin Kaepernick is saying, and I have no problem with this. He's protesting the manifestation of this country's original sin, as Professor Dr. Michael Eric Dyson brought up in Chicago the other day on our show. He's protesting the manifestation of this country's original sin. And it seems to, which is, you know, obviously slavery and the racism, the institutional racism that black people have been dealing with and our country has been dealing with since then. And it seems to me that Kaepernick is saying that his conscience won't allow him to stand until there is some remedy. There have been plenty of remedies. Things have gotten a lot better, but he feels that it's still not remedied. And by the way, when you look at differences in per capita income, education, and the way the police treat people, obviously he's not wrong about that. It hasn't been perfectly remedied. Then the question becomes, do you feel that we should honor how far we've come, or should we protest how far we still must go? And Kaepernick's personality and his own sensibilities tell him he must protest how far there still is to go. And that's what's great about living in this country. You can, and rather than try to create social pressure to coerce him to behave like everyone else and just to conform, how about acknowledging the fact that he has something to say?
Well, you acknowledge the fact that he has something to say, but let's take this to another level. Let's understand something. This, to me, is the greatest country in the world. To me and most black folks I know, we can talk all the stuff we want to. We ain't trying to go nowhere else, okay? But what we also need to recognize is that we're not trying to go anywhere else primarily because we're in this country, because we hear all day long about the liberties that come associated with being an American citizen. And we see people, you know, taking boats, you know, putting their lives in danger, you know, crossing barriers and beyond to get to this country, which speaks to the greatness of America. We understand all of that. However, by virtue of looking at the other things that take place in other parts of this world, whether it's Iraq, it's Syria, it's Yemen, it's Mexico, for crying out loud, the list goes on and on. Because we're willing, or because we've had it thrown in our face, rather, what takes place in other parts of this world where they don't have liberties that we have.
Russia, Turkey, Venezuela.
That speaks to the greatness of America. The problem with that is that black folks are saying, okay, that's fine, good and dandy, but what about us? And what about we're dealing with while we're here? Because when you talk about brutality on the part of police, and the reason why I phrase it that way, just for everybody out there, is because there are black police officers, there's Latino police officers, there are white police officers, and by and large, approximately 95%, if not better, are law-abiding citizens who go about the business of protecting and serving our communities every single day. We're talking about the actions of a few rogue individuals who happen to be wearing police uniforms that conduct themselves in insidious fashions. Having said all of that, because it transpires, because what Dr. Dyson pointed out, how you are licensed by the state to be enforcement officials, yet you're getting away with conducting yourself in this fashion. And then Colin Kaepernick alluded to paid leave, you know, which is another way of saying a vacation, for crying out loud, in a lot of people's eyes, while black folks are laying in the streets. Those are very, very real issues. And what it brings us back to is a reality that a lot of folks in America do not want to accept. We have come a long way. We are better today than we were 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 40, 50 years ago. But that does not negate the fact that in the eyes of a vast majority of African Americans in this country, this is still a racist society. It is still a racist environment that black people are subjected to every single day. Per capita income, education, et cetera, et cetera.
Victim of crime.
You know, I'm big on the fact that we got to address our own issues. Everything ain't everyone else's fault. Some things we have to own. But the flip side is that's not a license for white Americans to walk around ignoring the iniquities exercised by some people from their community against black people, too. It's not a license to ignore that or forget that.
Yeah, I mean,
and that's what Colin Kaepernick is saying.
If you're dealing with the content of his actual point,
right,
he has a strong point to make about his own conscience and what he feels the flag should stand for ideally, and whether or not we're living up to our ideals, and whether that allows him to stand up for that or protest it to bring awareness. The content of his point is one issue, and then there's the issue of this kind of sense of mass coercion. In other words, you have to stand up for the flag. The thing about the United States of America that makes us different from many other places is not simply that we're a pure democracy. In other words, that the majority rules. It's that we're a republic. It's that the minority is safe, protected from the tyranny of the majority. And that goes for the way, you know, our political system is set up, and I like to think that goes for our kind of reaction, our social reaction to someone who takes this kind of stand, whether or not it's popular, and you can agree or disagree or deal with the content of Colin Kaepernick's message. The idea that there should be this pressure to force him to conform and behave like everyone else is anti-American at its core, at our very foundation. The minority is protected from the tyranny of the majority, and here the majority would like to tyrannize Colin Kaepernick into doing something that he doesn't feel is right, whether or not you agree with his point.
The simpler way to put it is simply this. It personifies what a protest is supposed to be about.